This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. This week we're joined by half of Film Twitter to talk about the release of Dune, which just came out a few days ago. I don't know exactly what day this is going up, but it'll be within a week of when Dune dropped in theaters, so we're well within the spoiler embargo territory, so I guess let's just jump right into it. How's everyone feeling about the major Dune release?
Wow. It was really, really good. I will have a couple of minor critiques, but I'll save those for later. They're comparative quibbles.
I actually thought it was good. I'll be honest. I didn't think it was great, but I did enjoy the movie. I'm glad we had it. I thought it was really good.
You disappoint me, Jake. You're usually the one that shows up with the contrarian opinion.
Sometimes the movie sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say, sometimes the movie is so good it eclipses the contrarian nature of it. You know.
Well, there you go. How about you, Trevor?
Honestly, it left me a little lukewarm, so I'm hoping that you guys can sway me to your side so I can embrace the enthusiasm.
All right, last but not least, Tripp.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, I guess I'm probably in between the previous ones. Like, I thought that I'm really glad we have this movie. It was really, in some ways, very well done based on material that is really, really hard to adapt to a movie.
Difficult.
And I thought that they did a really good job. I have more than minor quibbles with what was like the problems with it and the differences with the book. But I don't know how to do it better is the other thing. So like I have critiques. I don't have solutions. So like that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I thoroughly enjoyed it. At the same time, there are problems for sure, and I wouldn't say minor ones. I would say that there's some pretty big ones that if you really enjoyed the literature and the story of Dune, that you're going to notice, and it's not going to be something that you're going to easily get over. So that's my take. Sorry, that was long-winded.
I will say this. It's been over 20 years since I read the book. So a lot of the book in and of itself has faded for me. And also, I mean, I saw the David Lynch movie and I saw the sci-fi miniseries. Mm. And of course, the David Lynch movie, I'm sorry, is atrocious. It's an offense against cinema and adaptations of literature to cinema in general. The sci-fi miniseries was actually much closer, and in some ways closer than this one. I would go so far as to say.
You definitely get a trade-off with the sci-fi one. I mean, that one you get a closer book, but it also looks like it was shot on a potato. So
yes.
For me, it's
not just the cinematography, though. Like, the problem, I mean, if you tried to go really close to the book, you're going to make a terrible movie. Like, Frank Herbert is the king of the info dump. Just like background expository, just explaining it's just so verbose in a lot of ways that you're going to make it a bad movie. Like, forget the cinematography and the special effects and those kind of things. You're going to make a bad movie doing that. You cannot distill that movie down to 2 hours. I don't care how good your special effects are. And so that's where it's hard, because I have really hard time figuring out what I would have done differently with this one, although I think that there's some significant things missing from it.
Well, I think the solution you have to ultimately come to is you have to hack it down. I mean, I think that I compare the film I keep coming back and comparing it to is the Dr. Sleep film, because that's another example of a 900-page book that managed to get hacked down into a 2.5-hour movie to varying levels of success. I mean, everyone seems to have a different opinion on it, whether or not you've seen it. But I think that's another example of, well, the way you do it, essentially, you just have to find the most bare bones understanding of the story, cut out as much extraneous subplots and story as possible, and cut to the very essence of it in a way that's very emotionally available for the audience. Because this version's definitely trying to make a more audience-friendly version of Dune than we've seen in the past, and if anything, it almost felt too boiled down, but not in a way that felt dumb. It's hard to describe, but there's a lot of ways you can kind of like. It
could have been longer, actually. Which sounds weird for a 2.5 hour part one.
I could have gone 3:15 with this movie. Like if they just like added a little bit more, I feel like I would have enjoyed it more.
Right,
I don't know.
My critiques are largely things that were missing.
Yeah,
not changes, but things that were missing.
Yep.
So as someone who never watched the sci-fi miniseries or read the book, I went in totally blind. And I didn't really notice any gaps. Like I personally didn't feel like there was anything missing. There weren't any glaring omissions from where I was sitting.
Did you read the book?
No, I haven't read the book yet.
Okay. Gotcha.
I went in totally blind.
Gotcha. Okay.
For me, I actually, as I read the book back in college, and I'm a big sci-fi buff, and I'll be honest, I actually didn't care that much for it. Like Tripp said, it's a little bit of an info dump. I thought it was way too long. I thought, and this is me. Back then I was a budding author. Right now I am an author, and just looking at it from that perspective, I was like, gee whiz, which is kind of funny because I feel like a hypocrite. That's one thing I love about Lord of the Rings. I love all the exposition and all the info dump, but for some reason, I just didn't like it in Dune. I feel the same way about Rendezvous with Rama. I didn't like that book for the same reasons. But so going into this, not really caring for the book. And by the way, I don't think it's a terrible book or it's trash. Just wasn't my taste. But so going into the film, and even not really being that big a fan of Denis Villeneuve, I went in, so I kind of went into this almost with a negative attitude, but then I walked out of it I felt my expectations were met. I felt like I had a good time. I thought the soundtrack was a little intrusive. Hans Zimmer departed from his sort of classical arrangement that he does and went more for an industrial sound, which by the way, with bagpipes, which by the way, there was a YouTube channel I saw and they did a really good analysis of Hans Zimmer's score of Dune. And the name of the YouTube channel escapes me, but anyway, it was. I thought that was kind of interesting for Hans Zimmer. I saw an interview with him where he said he did that on purpose. He wanted the soundtrack to be different, and he succeeded in that mile. But I just thought at times it was just kind of intrusive. It was kind of like in Zack Snyder's Justice League when Wonder Woman did anything, she sneezed and they would play her theme song, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we know."
that was a bit much.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't that bad, but I just felt like every chance they got,
they just played
these bagpipes, and I was like, "Okay, I get it."
I don't think you can overstate how bad that was. Yeah, so don't. Yeah,
it got a little annoying. It's like this is obviously a brief aside, but. Overall, I liked the Snyder cut, but as he ramped down on using the slow-mo, which the first hour could have been cut down to at least 45 minutes just by getting rid of so much slow-mo, easily. As he ramped down the slow-mo as the movie went on, he ramped up the use of the Wonder Woman theme.
Yeah.
It was like, we're going to trade one annoying thing for another.
And that's kind of how I felt about this film. I was like, Hans Zimmer, I'm doing something different, and I'm going to let the audience know I'm doing something different. But I'm not saying it was a bad soundtrack. I just thought at times it was intrusive.
I guess I didn't. I mean,
go ahead. I would have to rewatch it to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I guess it didn't really bother me because the Dune universe is so different than most sci-fi.
It is.
It is. It's like fun. I mean, if you read the books, you have like the Butlerian jihad, right? And various things like that, where it's just like a fundamentally different, you're like, wait, we're in an advanced scientific universe, and at the same time, there are no droids. You barely, like, no one's carrying guns or lasers or anything. You're fighting with blades and various things. And so, like, it's fundamentally different. And so, like, I feel like the musical score needed to be weird in a certain way. And so, like, I understand. I'm not that. I couldn't do it myself.
That's an interesting take on that. Yeah,
because I feel like it just needed to feel fundamentally different. A weird mixture between ancient and the future, and that's the Dune universe in a way that's not true in Star Trek or Star Wars or any of our classical science fiction or science fantasy. Right. Dune is like we went so far forward that we had to go backwards. And so I think that that's where the music was interesting to me, like interesting bagpipes and those kind of things, like more ancient musical methods. I thought it was interesting. I feel like that's what he's trying to go for. Whether or not it worked, I'm not totally sure, but it didn't distract me, at least. Like it felt different. I felt like they wanted to take us out of our world, but then also the science fiction world that we're so used to in cinema.
But whatever you can say about the film, you can't hold not being weird against it. It definitely embraces that to the fullest effect. I mean, even just like looking at the way it kind of picks like style, like it picks these like very strange little notes to kind of use as like aesthetic set dressing, like how in the Atreides home they have bullfighting ephemera and a giant bull's head. So there's like some Texan influence and almost, and then but they also have like these very Oriental style windows and very Japanese style like social etiquette practices. And then they're also playing bagpipes for reasons that don't seem to be comprehensible. But it's a very strange like set of like different things that are just happening all at once.
I should back up. Sorry, I don't want to like talk too much, but like I think we should back up for like people who are listening who haven't actually read the book. But like the Butlerian Jihad, I think is an important concept in Dune that you didn't get in the movie, which is weird.
Well, they cut out a lot of,
to be fair, you don't get it in the first book either.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But it's introduced in the second, but it kind of explains more of the world that was built in the first. And I think also it seems to me influenced the way that the movie was made. The Butlerian Jihad was essentially the world became so the universe or the galaxy became so advanced that we automated away jobs and various things and a lot of the things that people used to do. And so there was a revolt essentially against the order that created it. And so like that's why you don't see droids or robots or anything else like that in most of in Dune. You see some things that are like tools for illuminating, they follow you around and various things like that, but you don't see like the Star Wars style C-3PO or anything else like that. You don't see that kind of interaction.
AI is literally outlawed.
Yes, it's literally outlawed in the Dune universe, and so it's a weird mixture between future and past. Yeah, it's a weird mixture between future and past, and that's where the music kind of made some sense to me, where it's a weird mixture between future and past. They're bringing in bagpipes and various things like that. So, like, that's where, like, I think they could have done a better... Well, I don't know if they could have done a better job, I guess. It's just very interesting that they kind of didn't introduce that concept, because I think it was one of the more interesting aspects of Dune in the books, in my opinion.
Well, to quote one of the film critics for the New Yorker, it's kind of hard to take a director aside and say, "I want you to do the impossible again, but with more pizzazz." Like, it's kind of hard to...
Right. That's a good point. Now, I'm curious. Trevor, I think the only guy here who never actually read the book. The other books after or before or whatever, leave that aside. But just Dune in and of itself, did it strike you as weird? That whole, as Tripp pointed out, we're obviously way the hell in the future. Like, I think it even gave a year as a 10,000 something or another AD, but for some reason they're fighting with blades. I did note that the reason for that was never actually explained in the movie. I'm curious if that struck you as odd.
Okay, so confession. It didn't strike me as odd because I didn't realize that this was supposed to be our future. Like, I thought that this was more high fantasy, alternate
reality,
alternate universe.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that was humanity way in the future. I thought it was, sci-fi Game of Thrones, different
That's a point I'm going to bring up later.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that I've read is that some people thought that Hebert wrote it as a counter to Asimov's The Foundation, which is, Foundation is, in the future, and it's like, was that Asimov? I'm sorry, did I?
Asimov, yeah, you're right.
Oh, okay.
I just, as a counter to it, strikes me as odd.
Well, it's because The Foundation, I've only read the first. By the way, I've only read Dune, and I've only read the first Foundation. I've never read any of the sequels. But I felt like The Foundation was trying to present like a more scientific future, right? The science.
It's very technocratic.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And Dune, it's more like a feudalism. So he was saying, whereas Asimov was saying it's going to be more like a techno future. It's going to be there, and science is going to save us. Technology is going to save us. Right. Dune is saying, no, that's not going to happen. We're just going to keep repeating the same old mistakes we've always made.
Correct.
I've heard that. I'm curious what you guys think about that, because I've read that there's that.
Well, that's tension. An interesting. I don't know that I would say Herbert was intentionally trying to make a counter. I'd have to really look into that. But I will say it's a fair point that it is an interesting counterpoint to the Foundation trilogy, because I've read the original Foundation trilogy. And I've read all of Asimov's Foundation books, and I've read some of the prequel trilogy. The first book of the prequel trilogy, which was just crap. I stopped bothering.
It was garbage. Yeah,
it was utter garbage, and I didn't feel the need to follow on beyond that. And honestly, most of Asimov's Foundation books are mediocre, except for the original trilogy.
I agree with that. I thought Foundation was really mediocre.
Yeah, the original trilogy I really enjoyed, but all of his other prequels and sequels, they just got, I don't know, they were mediocre and largely unnecessary for the primary story. But it is accurate to say that was largely technocratic and bureaucratic. Asimov is very much coming at it with a scientific, humanistic point of view, whereas Herbert is like, while I have a very different perspective than Frank Herbert on a great many things, Herbert essentially does have the point of view that no, human nature is human nature, and human nature ain't going to change, which means you're constantly going to have power struggles. You're constantly going to have people trying to screw each other over, and the systems will vary, but there are only so many different systems of governance and everything that you can have, and they will largely be dictated by circumstances. And in this case, you have it's a very interesting future. Faster than light travel exists. However, it's extremely limited.
Yep.
And it's something, again, that's something that didn't get into in part.
It's not a democratized resource in the way that it is remotely. In like Star Trek or especially Star Wars or any of the more popular versions. It's not
Andromeda. It's more even.
It's controlled entirely by the Navigators Guild.
Yeah, and so
Navigators Guild is the East India Trading Company on crack.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and more than, I mean, yes, I agree. I think that Herbert was he was a technological optimist that we could build all these things, but he was also kind of a realist about human nature.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, Dune is a study of the hero's arc of the protagonist, right? And then also his interaction with the society around him. Because what happens afterwards, whenever he kind of reached the hero's arc, they're like, well, now, and I don't know how much we want to get into the further books, but like it's a struggle with him to like what happens after the hero's arc is what happens after Paul reaches the hero stage. right? What needs to happen there? What is he satisfied with? But what does society demand of him? And so Dune was like more of a setting. The story is more of a setting for this like hero's journey set in a very realistic sociological problem.
Everything that happens after the first Dune novel is just backcrack crazy and off the rails.
Yeah, I mean,
I've never actually read the books, but there was this podcast a while ago that I followed that went through and did thorough discussions of all the books, including Frank Herbert's, and then the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson prequels and sequels. And so most of my knowledge of the Dune universe as a whole, frankly, comes from that one podcast. And I did read the House book prequels, like kind of the first Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert prequels that came out. Which I enjoyed them for what they were. They were good. They were good enough, but not on. Yeah. I mean, not on Frank's level.
Yeah, and I don't want to like say too much, because I don't want to spoil it for the people who are listening.
Yeah, we're spending most of the time talking about the books and the movies.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it is something they're hinting at, even in this movie.
They are. Yeah.
That hey, what happens when you're like prophesied to be the Messiah, right? So what is your expectation? What is your experience? And then what is the experience or the expectation of the people around you? And so I would encourage the audience to not only like watch this movie, because I really enjoyed it, but just like think, what would happen then if you were prophesied to be this kind of like galactic Messiah, and you reach some pinnacle? Like, what would happen afterwards? Like, what would be the end result of that? And that's what Herbert, I think, was trying to get at, is that, like, Paul is, he's the son not only of this, like, Lord, to lack of, or what?
Yeah, he's not just the heir of House Atreides.
He's not just the heir of House Atreides. He's the son of a witch. And he has these powers and he has these special abilities and he can see the future, and then he starts interacting with all these people, and it's just very fascinating. Like, what would happen to that person if they were set in a real universe? Like, it's a fascinating, it's not like a Star Trek utopian future that we're talking about. It's like Herbert, like, right. It's a thought experiment, and it's a very fascinating one. That's why, like, the Dune universe is so unique in science fiction in that way.
Okay. So let's use that as a jumping off point back into the movie, because I think that my biggest problem. I'm curious if you guys would agree, but I think my biggest problem with the film is it doesn't get far enough in the book to actually explore what the answers to those questions are. Like, because it cuts off right as he meets the Fremen.
I would take a step back even further and say I was never clear on just exactly what Paul wants. To go back to screenwriting class. What does the hero want? What's in the way? What's at stake?
He doesn't know yet.
And so maybe that's why the movie leaves me cold, because he doesn't know what he wants, so I can't really identify with him. I can't support him.
Yeah, the book takes more time in that part of the story, where he doesn't really know. He's more or less a kid. And they go to this planet, and these bad things start happening, and so he's like worried about his family. And so a lot of his motivations are more logical, right? What would a 10-year-old or 11-year-old or 12-year-old care about if they saw people that they know, friends, family, getting assassinated?
It's a very reactionary book in that sense, because every one of his actions is a reaction to someone else doing something. Whether it's the Gom Jabbar test, where he's being forced to deal with this extreme pain that almost no one could actually handle, or if it's. But by the end of the movie, he actually makes his first real decision, which is, instead of trying to get off world and seek help, because apparently
I'm staying here.
Yeah, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to actually be what my demands as the inheritor of House Atreides and this new person welcome among the Fremen actually demand me to be, which is the first.
It didn't actually but it wasn't set up enough to me.
No, that's
and the movie. That's the weakness of the movie, is that it ends on kind of a dud. That, like, there was no, like, I don't know why anyone who had not read the books would understand why Paul, at the end of the movie, would choose to stay.
Well, as Hitchcock says, if the ending doesn't work, it's because the setup didn't work, and which makes me think that something about the way that Denis cut this script in half really wasn't conducive for Paul's arc, which I think is probably the biggest weakness of the movie, is that this movie that without that ending to pay off everything that's going to happen and just actually start seeing his character decisions, this feels like a really uneven, like, messy experience.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I disagree.
Okay.
And the reason I disagree is because Paul, you see him key right away. But like, basically as soon as he's aware of it, you see him key in on this whole this idea of the Fremen Messiah. And he's clearly willing to co-opt that. He also wants vengeance for the murder of his father. He also wants to honor his father and what he was wanting to do on Arrakis, which was cultivate desert power, and he's just been handed it. And all of these things come together. All of those three things: honoring what his father wanted to do, vengeance for his father, and co-opting the Fremen Messiah. They are all conducive to all of his ends, and his primary end, frankly, is getting vengeance for his father.
I agree. Yeah, that was my thought.
And I think that I think that's clear, and I think that is his motivation.
Yeah, I agree
right now, that's what he wants. Now, whether or not that's ultimately what winds up being his goal, that's different. That's a different matter altogether, and that could be a matter of debate. Although I could probably make a good case that is the thing that drives him all the way to the end, which I will not spoil for Trevor's sake. Because it's epic. For me, by the way,
most of my criticisms of the film were more technical in nature. Is there were some subtle things that I didn't remember from the book that I had to go back and look up later, because I was like, oh wait, I don't remember this reference or whatever, since I haven't read it since college. And I wasn't going to reread it before this movie. That's insane. But but most of my stuff were technical. Like, I felt like some scenes moved too quickly and some scenes moved too slowly. But that's always been, Tyler and Ninja Man follow me on Twitter. They know that that's one of my frequent criticisms of Denis Villeneuve, is I think he's terrible at pacing his films. But I think that with Dune, that this actually worked to his advantage, is because Dune is such a dense book, and since he was able to cut it into, I think that actually worked. That actually played to his strength. So, that was kind of my thing. But yeah, I actually thought that it had a very satisfying ending. I thought that felt like it all came together. And like Tyler says, normally I'm the contrarian on this. I would normally be bashing this like I did Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I honestly felt that way about this movie. I even told my wife, because I actually told my wife, I was like, great, because I was invited to talk about it on a different podcast as well. And I was like, oh, great, now I have to watch Dune. Like, that was my initial thought. But then when it was over, I was like, oh, I actually enjoyed that movie. That was actually a pretty good film. And also, technically wise, it was just a masterpiece.
So like, Tyler, did you find the ending satisfying, or like, were you happy with that?
I mean, I thought the ending was probably the most frustrating part generally for me, just because it cuts off.
How I felt.
It cuts off before all of the really great stuff in the back half of the book happens.
But at the same time,
here's my hypothetical.
You've got a movie that is cut in two.
Yeah, well, here's my hypothetical.
You knew that going in.
Here's my hypothetical. What if the second half didn't get made, and this is what we were stuck with forever? Would this feel?
I would be annoyed, but I wouldn't be annoyed because the first movie left me wanting. I mean, I know the rest of the story, so I would be annoyed that we didn't get the second movie, because I really want to see what they do with it. This one is it an ending in and of itself? No, but you can't do that with Dune. You literally can't. You cannot split it into two truly self-contained movies.
Right. No, that's where I'm like, I'm critical, but at the same time, I'm like, what would I do differently? And I'm like, I don't know.
I am
honestly,
looking
I don't
at
know.
it. I'm looking at it more as a miniseries.
Yeah.
In my mind, this isn't two self-contained movies. This is a miniseries.
This is Game of
to be
Thrones.
Released in theaters.
This is Game of Thrones or something like that, where it's like a slow burn that we can take our time with things, and that's how I think it should have been told. I thought that this was really good. But yeah, I mean, but even the way that they were setting up the ending, where like he has a choice, right? It's not just escape and be a nobody. It's escape and get vengeance. Like, I don't think that vengeance was off the table whenever like that was offered to him.
No, not necessarily. He could have gone to the land.
Exactly. And so like, I just don't feel like there was a clear, like, no, I'm going to be here for this reason. And this is what, like, I just don't feel like that was clearly in the mind of Paul explained why.
See, I totally disagree. I thought that was very well explained. I was like, oh, okay, I know why he's staying. I know why he's doing this, because they even make a reference that he's going to make a play for the throne at one point. But I felt like the reason he stayed was he's like, I want to do this. Like, to me that wasn't.
And he even referenced Leto's Desert Power.
Yeah, exactly.
Right there at the end. I mean, the end is essentially it's split up. The way they split up the movie is you've got this part one, which is Paul is as one of you guys mentioned, essentially a kid. He's a kid about to become an adult. And at the end, he becomes the adult. He becomes the guy in charge. He becomes the one who's making the decisions. Now, in part two, he is the one who's going to be driving the action. And you see that in that decision to say, no, we're not getting off-world. We're staying here. And by the way, along the way, we're going to totally stick it to the Emperor, and it's going to be amazing.
Right. I guess I just don't feel like at the end of that movie, there's a lot of confidence that Paul can be that guy, or he has reason to believe that, other than these visions, which are like this.
As far as that goes,
yeah.
Sure,
because he literally like what 10 minutes before that killed his first guy, right? Like
literally. But again, that didn't bother me. I thought that was just part of it being a 2-part film. That was if you're going to have a film split in two, you're going, I used to. No,
I know. I'm complaining about the thing that I don't know how to solve, but like is like the book like allowed us to see like that larger arc of him becoming a man in a way
that's because it's a whole book,
right? I know I'm complaining about the thing that like I don't know how to solve, but that's my problem.
I do know how to solve it. It's make 1 5-hour movie.
5-hour movie, yeah.
Honestly, that's the way you fix that problem.
The alternative solution is you do a more radical adaptation that hones in on a certain themes of the book and does it in a much different way that doesn't exactly follow the story.
And that happened. Yeah, we call it David Lynch's Dune.
That, but actually good. That's the difference. But I'm not saying it couldn't be done. This is obvious. And my complaints are pretty much nitpicks. I think. I mean, I'd still say this is a very good movie, even though I do think it's messy. I mean, I've seen so many people online just absolutely rip this thing apart. I do not agree with that at all. Like, I don't.
No, I don't agree. Like,
this is a good.
Going back to your Dr. Sleep comparison, I enjoyed Dr. Sleep. I thought it was good, and it was, but it faced the same kind of criticism, and it's kind of funny because like people kept asking the director, is it a sequel to the Stephen King miniseries, or is it a sequel to the Shining? And but that why am I blanking on his name? Yes, thank you. That Kubrick made, Stanley Kubrick. And at first he was like keeping it ambiguous, but I guess Stephen King hurt his feelings during production because he's like, oh, it's totally a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And it's kind of funny because like I actually enjoyed it. I felt like the best movie I could compare it to, though, is Waiting on the Barbarians with Johnny Depp. I felt it was very similar themes with that, although that movie's very anti-colonial. I was telling someone in my review, I said that I actually thought it was kind of accidentally conservative because it's very anti-establishment as well. But anyway, what I'm saying with this film is, this movie or this book was impossible to do it exactly like the book. There's just no way it was going to happen.
No,
so
I agree.
You either got to do it the David Lynch way, like Tyler was saying, but good, or you've got to do it the Denis Villeneuve way. And as far as I'm concerned, I thought it was a success, and I'm not even a big fan of the book. So just my thoughts. But
I don't want
to. The biggest thing they left out that bothered me was they should have done more to develop the relationship between Lady Jessica and Duke Leto. That relationship was very glossed over, very cold in this version. And that was a poor choice. They could easily have added another 5 minutes onto the movie to develop the intimacy between them a little bit. Because the whole thing is that they are very much in love. You get a little hint of that when he's like, I should have married you, like literally right before they're all murdered. Right before House Atreides is virtually wiped off the face of the universe.
Yeah. And I was like, wait, they aren't married?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was a mistake on the director's part, not giving that relationship a chance to just breathe a little bit. You don't get any of that. Now, as a result, you get a lot more of Lady Jessica and her conflict between her relationship with Paul and her relationship as part of the Bene Gesserit. You get a lot more of that than you have in any other adaptation. But it was still lacking to not have that relationship between her and Leto. Another thing that was obviously missing was Baron Harkin and some of his pastimes, shall we say.
it's a PG-13 movie. Of course they cut it out.
In the book and in the David Lynch and in the sci-fi miniseries, he's very openly homosexual, very openly into the younger pretty boys, and very openly into abusing them to the point that they die in the process. They never, at no point on page or on screen, was it ever explored in depth exactly how far he goes, but he clearly uses and abuses as many late teen, early 20s people as he possibly can, and enjoys it greatly. And it enjoys probably the torment and the death as much as anything else, based on what I saw in some of the prequel books.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of like tried to distill a lot of those emotions down into him being a glutton.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which of course is accurate. Yeah. He is in fact a glutton,
right? But like just a slave to his appetites.
Yeah,
and so like I feel like that's what they were trying to cinematically go for. But I agree with you that like it's missing. It's missing, and it's missing
because they would never dare paint a gay guy as the bad guy. Let's be honest. That's a sacrifice to the PC gods of Hollywood.
Well, yeah, it also
same as gender swapping kinds.
I mean, they both ultimately serve the ultimate purpose of making it very, very clear to the reader and audience that Baron Harkonnen is 1,000% evil and basically has no depth.
And don't get me wrong, I love Stellan Skarsgård's portrayal of Baron Harkonnen.
They're just doing it from two different.
Really good job with that.
Well, in one approach, he's a horrible murder pedophile. In the other one, he is a disgusting flying glutton man that is just a ball of fat,
right?
And that just enjoys murdering people for money. Like it's just
with shades of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely like.
Out of curiosity, does anybody know what happened to Stellan Skarsgård's voice?
In what sense?
Because like the last time I saw him in an MCU movie, he sounded more or less normal. And then when I saw him, I finally watched Chernobyl recently, and his voice is all gravelly, like he's been smoking 5 packs a day for the last 20 years.
Maybe he
And
has.
he had that same voice in this.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's
I
consistent,
didn't notice,
across the
honestly. That's
performances,
interesting.
Huh.
If it's consistent, then it's probably just like him. It's not the performance, unless unless
all of a sudden,
Denis Villeneuve
all of a
took
sudden,
one
he's
look
like, yeah, kill them all.
or
like-
we're probably shooting this in 2019. Maybe Denis Villeneuve just took a break from recording, sat down and watched Chernobyl, and was like, Stellan, I want you to do.
I need that voice. I need that voice for the Baron, and it does work. It works great for the Baron, actually. And honestly, that was how I recognized him. I was like, wait a minute, that's Stellan Skarsgård. Holy crap!
I didn't recognize him.
Is that
honestly.
What
I didn't
was
recognize
that
it
at all?
first.
I assume that was a fat suit because I don't think he did like a transformational Christian Bale performance here where he just got the fattest humanly possible for this role, but
And had his legs removed. I mean, method all the way.
Obviously, but.
Oh, I was just going to say, I felt like the stuff that they left out was the movie was trying to make him more mysterious as the villain. Because one thing with Dune was I felt like it's very similar in tone where as opposed to having like one central bad guy, it seems like it's similar to Gundam. I compare it to Gundam where there's like different organizations that are controlling the colonies in space, and then what's happening with the Earth Federation, and then even the Gundam pilots have their own agendas at some points. I feel like Dune is very similar to that, and so I think with this film, I thought that they left a lot of the stuff out about the Baron. They were just building it up for the next film, so you kind of get
as far as that goes, I would
agree. He is. But,
well, it's also clear that a lot of the point of the book and the movie is about the way systems and power kind of trickle down into the individual people's lives. I mean, obviously there's elements of like the role religion plays in this universe and the way politics plays in this universe.
Which
so all these
only comes out slightly in this. One of the things they left out, and I'm not saying it was necessary for the story, but they left out any references to like the Orange Catholic Bible and its prohibitions on certain things like AI.
I think you see it at one point, though.
I think some of that was in the first book.
I think you see a character.
It was referenced. It was referenced. It was but like there's nothing like that here. There's no explanation for the kind of world that the technological world that was built. In a world where there's intergalactic travel and like that's the thing. Like some of these like set pieces and some of these some of the cinematography is just, it's amazing. Like it's really a beautiful film. Like the way that the spaceships and the various things they interact with the world, it's beautifully done. And then you're left I'm left wondering, having like read the books, like how is the average person gonna like make sense of the fact that you have these amazing technological things interacting with this world, and then yet there's these basic things that you would expect to be in this world that aren't there.
Well, and that's where into the thing that I was going to bring up. One of the sins of omission. They never explain the whole Holtzman effect. Everyone I'm sure noticed their shields. Now, the reason they have blades is because, and they sort of hint at part of the reason when they say the slow blade.
The slow blade, yes.
Which, if someone is astute, they're reasoning that a projectile weapon also is not going to penetrate the shield. However, everybody thinks the future, and they think laser guns naturally, which we do see high-powered lasers do exist. You can see them cutting through the door. The reason they don't have laser guns is because when the laser gun hits the shield, it basically triggers a nuclear level explosion, or at least it almost certainly can. Which is explained in the book, never remotely touched on in the movie.
Right.
Well, I think it goes down to part of the philosophy of how this film is adapting its story. I mean, it's definitely much more action and character focused in the way it approaches things. Like, I remember Denis, or very early in the production, said his goal was to make adult Star Wars. And so you can kind of see that in the way it kind of boils it down, its story, down to it being this very operatic genre film, where it's like so much of it's just about trying to make this story condensed, but also feel enormous. So the details kind of fall by the wayside, but all of the big ideas definitely make it there. But I don't. But I think that for an average audience,
it's not adult Star Wars.
Well,
Dune is not adult Star Wars. Yeah. First of all, Dune precedes Star Wars.
Yeah.
And anyone who reads Dune and then watches Star Wars can see all the things that George Lucas took from it. A lot, FYI.
Well, my point is just that I think that his philosophical approach was to make this a much more like event and epic scale focused thing. So
the story in and of itself isn't adult Star Wars.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is medieval Dune. Game of Thrones is fantasy Dune. I'm not exaggerating.
No, I am the only one on the. Am I the only one on this call who's never watched an episode of Game of Thrones?
I also have never watched an episode of Game of Thrones, but
I will say
you hear enough about it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I can keep up. I was just wondering.
I will say Dune is a little bit more morally binary than Game of Thrones in some ways. I think. I mean, there aren't a lot of
that's true.
There aren't a lot of
in the first book. Evil. Yes.
There aren't a lot of pure.
After that, no.
Okay, I was gonna say there aren't a lot of 100% pure evil characters in Game of Thrones. While Baron Harkonnen is not a Game of Thrones character. He is just too evil to fit in.
Well, no, but you could say he's Ramsay, or there's Joffrey. There's plenty of morally just abhorrent Game of Thrones, or the Mad King Aerys. Call him the Mad King Aerys. That's fine.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my problems, and so going back to it, I'm just thinking about it more and more, is that fundamentally Dune is a story of a hero's journey, and it starts out with Paul Atreides, and he's a kid, and he's weak, and he's vulnerable, and he goes through this whole transformation, and I guess. Going back to Joseph Campbell, he, at least in the first movie, his vulnerability is I'm never afraid for him. I guess one of my problems is, I'm never actually afraid that he's going to lose.
But that's even something that translates to the book a little bit, because his character is strength and capability as a warrior is established very early on. Mm-hmm. That he is morally and physically capable of holding himself in a dangerous situation. I mean, that's partly established in the Gab Jabbar test. I'm going to mispronounce that, but
right. No. I think him individually, but I don't know. I guess reading the book. I mean, again, it's a slower burn, obviously, with the book. It's much longer, and so. He seems, at least early in the book, though he's capable, he's not an incompetent, fuck up, right? Or something like that. He's not that. But he is afraid, right? Mm-hmm. People are getting assassinated alongside of him. Bodyguards are dying, his family's getting assassinated, various things like that. And, he's worried. And so you don't think that he's capable of taking on the Empire early on or anything else like that. And I feel like the movie, just the way the story is written, again, it's not the movie, but the way the story is written is that has to be a slow burn, because if you progress too fast through that stage mm-hmm. of being vulnerable, of I'm not capable of taking on the Empire, to I just moved here a week ago, and then they killed all my family, and now I'm going to take on the entire Empire. It kind of it doesn't feel as satisfying to me. I think that's where my problem was with where they ended up, where it just progressed too fast.
Well, these
for it to feel satisfying. I guess that's where I'm trying to articulate as I'm processing it, but that's kind of where I'm at.
The movie makes it feel like these events happened over the course of a week. There's not a lot of time.
Well, they kind of do.
Yeah.
Even in the book, I thought there was more time in the book.
I think maybe in the book, maybe it's a couple of weeks, But the Atreides are not in control of Arrakis long.
Right.
And they do hit in most of the important scenes. There's a couple of other scenes in the books that I would have liked to see to establish how the Atreides would have ruled Arrakis differently. One of the biggest ones is, and Tripp or Jacob, correct me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but there's a scene where they're like wringing out a rag with water or something just outside the gates of like the main compound to keep whatever it is, so the peasants can lap it up basically. I'm exaggerating, but that's basically what's going on. And Jessica is like, no, not cool. That's not how we're doing it here. And she says like, I don't know if it's every evening or every feast or what have you, but anyone who comes up will be given a cup of water. You won't have to literally sop it up off the ground in some sort of humiliating fashion. There's a scene like that would have been nice. Or in this, you saw the scene with the you saw that scene in that little atrium sort of thing with the different trees and stuff growing. Where that is properly placed is actually in the primary palace compound or whatever, and it's something that the Harkonnens kept for their own, I don't know, personal pride. But Jessica is like, no, we're gonna save this as a promise of what Arrakis could be. And again, those are just different things that show you, one, the character of Jessica, but also the character of House Atreides as a whole. Which, actually gets me to another thing with the whole gender swapping of kinds. In a lot of things, I could understand it as like, okay, I get it. You want to have an extra female character, and this is one that isn't terribly central, and it doesn't really matter which way one or the other. Fine, but in Dune, you literally have a whole order of women who's secretly manipulating everything behind the scenes. And one of the most important characters of the entire story is Lady Jessica. And then, I forget how to pronounce her name, Chowry, but the Fremen chick that Paul winds up falling in love with. And then later on, Princess Irulan. Like, women are like some of the primary motivators of this entire storyline. Not just in Dune, not just behind the scenes, like kind of with Arwen and Lord of the Rings, but out in front, in your face, throughout the entire series of books. I mean, if there was ever a series that didn't need a character gender swap, it's this one.
Yeah, to the point where they wouldn't even kill outright Paul because they were afraid of the order of like women who would come after them. But it's very interesting, and even the reason that like the order was upset with Paul's mom about bearing a child was that
he was a son.
He was a son, and he was a he, and men are impetuous, like we're like very aggressive, and like some of the power that they bear should not be borne by a man, unless that man is extremely worthy, and we need to kill him if he's not. And that's what the whole like, I'm gonna stab you with the poison needle if you can't bear, like if you can't control yourself. It's a
sort of
good.
Because actually, what they were upset about was that she had jumped the gun.
Right.
They weren't expecting the Kwisatz Haderach for another generation, which leads me to believe very much that the Kwisatz Haderach, which was supposed to be like the super duper powerful dude, was supposed to be a dude. They were upset.
No, it was supposed to be a dude. Yes, I agree. Like that was supposed to be a dude, but they were like
she had jumped the gun. It was supposed to be another generation down the road.
Right. Yeah, but the test was, can you control yourself? And that's like one of the they controlled the procreation and like who got born and various things, because
I don't know that was specifically a man thing though. I think that was more of a human thing.
But why was it always like you're not supposed to bear a man until this point?
Again, because I think they thought they were going to need a woman yet to mate with a man, presumably Fade of House Harkonnen, actually, who would then produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
Okay, I don't remember that part, so maybe okay.
You okay down there, Trevor?
Yeah. We're getting kind of into the weeds here, man. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
We're
I guess
book a lot.
I don't know if we want to bring it. Do we want to keep like going down the rabbit hole, or do we want to like bring it higher level on the film itself?
We should probably bring it back to the film itself, because Fade hasn't even been introduced in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Something I wanted to mention about the movie was, I know that Dune has been plagiarized by Star Wars and every science fiction series that has come since, but I really enjoyed how this adaptation never felt tropey. Like it still felt wholly original, not like the John Carter movie, which I love, but yet the whole time you watch John Carter, you're like, oh well, yeah, Star Wars did that. Star Wars did that. I never had that moment with Dune. I mean, it still feels really fresh, even though it is the archetype for a lot of our tropes.
That gets right to the fact that, like Tripp was saying, the Dune universe is so unique. Mm-hmm. It really is a phenomenal creation of Herbert, even though, again, after this, it goes way the hell off the rails.
Well,
it's weird, and even though, like I said, I haven't really read the follow-on books, based on the sci-fi miniseries, based on a couple of them, and the discussions I've heard of them, I don't know if I'd much cared for them, to be perfectly honest.
Well, the temptation to trend chase definitely could have sunk this production a lot sooner than possible. I mean, if Denis had just taken like how do I adapt like every single scene in this movie, and he just started filling them with like cinema references, like this is the Lawrence of Arabia homage, this is the Apocalypse Now homage. Like this would be a much cheaper film. It would feel kind of like I'd say it'd feel like a worse version of like Ad Astra or something, where it's just like, oh, this is clearly the homage to that. This is clear. There's never a point where that happens. Like I'm sure.
Actually, I would almost disagree. I felt like, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, that is reminiscent of Apocalypse Now. That feels like World War II footage. And it certainly seemed to pay homage to filmic conventions, but not in a distracting way or in a cheap way. But no, I certainly found myself thinking of other movies, even in the framing and cinematography, and I loved it. I appreciated it.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that it could have been a much lazier shorthand for trying to get these complex ideas across.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even Dune, like the Lynch Dune was kind of trend chasing Star Wars in a way, just because it came out in the same time as it. It was clearly. They clearly wanted a space action movie, and that's why they cut the movie down from its famous 4 hour.
No, they saw something that worked, and they're like, "I'm just going to make that. Here's the story. I'm going to try and do it." And
what do we get the rights to?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I agree, because it's like I watched, sadly, Gunpowder Milkshake, and it was just clearly trend chasing John Wick. Like they even had there's a scene in the first John Wick movie where he goes in this nightclub. And it has like these really kind of lights that were shining on him, and they were different colors, different variations of colors. And there's a scene of that in Gunpowder Milkshake, and it was just clearly a ripoff of the scene from John Wick. I think it was in a bowling alley instead of a nightclub. But same with, I watched a movie with Sam Pepper, which really hurt my feelings. I think Sam Pepper is one of the most underrated actors of our time. But he was in a movie called Trigger Point. Total John Wick ripoff, and it's and the temptation there, especially Villeneuve having previously poorly done a sequel to Blade Runner. I know there was probably a temptation for him to trend trace, but instead he didn't. He chose to make Dune his own, and I applaud him for that. As one of his harshest critics. I remember one time I saw an article where he did an interview where he said, I pitched a Batman film to the DC universe or something like that. And I retweeted it and I said, oh, so it's just 5 hours of Batman walking through Gotham, and then when he finally gets to the Joker, he just throws him off the side of the building or something like that. And like, because that's
it'd be better than the Darren Aronofsky version.
Fair enough. But I'm just saying for Dune, I really feel like he did pull it together in the best way possible, and good for him. Like I said, I'm one of his harshest critics, but I thought he did a really good job with this movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we're being, or maybe me, I feel like I've been very negative on the movie so far, and I've watched it twice. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm so thrilled that this movie got made, because Dune is actually one of my favorite science fiction books, and that's why I care this much. And I care enough to get on a podcast and nitpick about what I would have, like, what I have a problem with. But like, it's also a beautiful film. Like, it is, like, visually, it is beautiful. It is well acted. Like, there's no performance in the cast that I feel like is bad. I feel like everyone, it's believable. No one takes me out of the story that they're trying to act, and visually it paints the world in like a larger than life, completely separate universe than the one that we're inhabiting. And I loved it. That's what Dune should do, and that's what so much of the verbose, like, info dump of Herbert actually did in his writing, was just take you out of, like, okay, I'm operating in a completely separate place than what I know on Earth. And I thought that's beautiful. It's not minimalist or anything else like that. It's really well done. And so I don't want to be too negative on the movie, because I don't know that I certainly couldn't have done a better job, and I don't know exactly how I would fix any of the things that I'm critiquing. So I don't want to be overly negative. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the whole thing, I was actually, I think the first time that I watched it, and I've watched it, I think two and a half times. I watched like another half time. I think the first time I watched it, I was just I was just amazed at what I was seeing. Like, it was really, really beautiful, and it's
an accomplishment.
Yeah,
it should go without saying we're all simping for it, because I think we all want part two. So,
and I would just like to make a correction. I said Sam Pepper. I meant Barry Pepper was in Trigger Point. My apologies to Barry Pepper. I think you're awesome. Just don't be in a Trigger Point sequel.
It's funny, because I'm usually not the guy who likes to compliment a movie too much on its special effects, because usually if somebody, the first thing you say about a movie is, oh man, it looked great, the special effects were awesome, if that's the first thing you say about a movie, that's usually a sign the movie is crap.
It's like a girl that someone's trying to set you up to, and be like, she's really
got a
nice,
really beautiful smile,
really nice personality. You're like,
to be fair, every $200 million blockbuster except for Black Widow looks really, really good.
Totally true with the movie. Yeah.
Well, and Tyler, your point right there is, for like probably the last 10 years, I've been of the opinion that if your movie special effects don't hold up, you just really suck. There's literally no. I have seen big budget special effects in fan films that people make on, probably laptops or desktops that they manage to scrounge together. Okay, there's no excuse for bad special effects in a major Hollywood production. Just none whatsoever. If they're there, you're being lazy or just way too rushed. I don't care what your excuse is. It's not valid. So I always pay more attention to the story anyway. But with this one, it was so well done. Everything looked so natural, so perfectly part of the world that it was in. And it meshed with the story so beautifully. The special effects were great.
I was actually just like jaw dropped the whole time. I was like, I don't like.
It was so
I agree.
compelling just to watch.
I don't. Yeah,
and the special effects are in service to service to the story.
Yeah,
they're not a Michael Bay film where it's just a distraction of like what's going on. Like, that's not what's going on here. Like, It's beautiful. I mean, I keep using that word. It's beautiful.
I don't know,
It
man.
is.
Did
It
you
really
see the
is.
trailer for Ambulance before this, or did you the new Michael Bay movie?
No. Just I have a
Oh, Michael Bay
hatred
has a
of
new movie
Michael
coming out
Bay.
in February. So.
What is this ambulance of which you speak?
Oh, I think it's a lower budget movie, but it's just like a heist movie where like a guy who's robbing a bank kidnaps an ambulance and drives it through L.A. with like the entire L.A. police chasing them the entire time. So it's going to be a Michael Bay movie, but who knows? But I don't know.
Well, so long as Optimus Prime shows up at some point,
Optimus Prime is the ambulance.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Or well, I don't know. There actually is an Autobot that is an ambulance.
Okay, so going back to the story, guys. Like, so the special effects. I think
until
we're
the
all
Zoom call kills itself. So yeah, let's get back to it.
Okay, so going back to the story, I mean, I think we're in agreement that the looks of the movie is fantastic. I guess one of the other things that we didn't talk about is, like, in the story of the hero's journey, is the reluctance of the hero to take on that mantle, right? And so, like, we had one scene kind of Paul saying, like, I don't necessarily want this, and his dad saying something like, try it on, right? Like, take your time. You don't have to do this. It also, like, I could have used a more like drawn out version of his reluctance to take on the mantle, so that it seemed like more of a struggle by the end. I think that's just another thing that like bothered me, that it just seemed too like, okay, we need to have a scene of him reluctantly like being like expressing some reluctance of being like
I don't remember. Was that really part of the book at all?
I don't remember if it's part of the book. I think that it was like a distilled
and even as
down,
part of the hero's journey. I mean, I think that's more of a modern version of the hero's journey.
Yeah, I don't think
that has to be reluctant. Whereas, to reference Star Wars again, very famously based on Joseph Campbell's right. hero's journey. At no point up until The Last Jedi was Luke Skywalker ever at all reluctant to be the hero.
Right.
That was
that's true.
That was like his his freaking purpose in life.
There was a
right.
There
but
was
then you also have like the Lion King or something like that, which is another one of the ones that Campbell like referenced, where like Simba was reluctant to become the hero after like a failure or something like that. You don't see that in Luke Skywalker.
Well, you see Paul, it, but it only lasts about 12 seconds. He has like one scene where he's like, maybe I shouldn't do this, and then Obi-Wan's like, you should do this.
He sees the monkey, and the monkey talks to his dead dad. I mean, I just like, I could have used more like that. I guess the progression of Paul is one of the things that I could have used more. If anything, what I loved about, I love the story. The world of Dune is super fascinating to me, and then the progression of Paul as kind of a male protagonist who like makes an arc of like going from adolescence to adulthood is the other thing that really works for me for Dune. And like, I could just use more cowbell. And that's kind of where I was at with it. That I just wanted more of it.
It needs more panache.
Call me old school, but that just doesn't bother me. That was one of my big complaints about The Green Knight, was the original epic poem was about Sir Gawain being an aspirational hero. You wanted he battled all these temptations, he battled all these foes, but he overcame it in the end. Whereas the movie that just came out this year, I felt like him failing made him a hero, and I think that's a terrible message to send to people. For me, I like a hero that I can root for. Not that there can't be hesitation. Like I always say, the original Lion King is my favorite animated film. Certainly my favorite animated Disney film. But so I'm not saying they can't be that way, but I think there is something missing, sort of, in modern cinema where they want to take heroes, particularly male heroes, who aren't aspirational anymore, And I really think that's why sort of even John Wick kind of clicks, is even though John Wick is kind of the bad guy, right? He's an assassin, but he clicks because you're thinking, oh, he's real sleek, he's cool, he dresses well, he knows how to shoot a gun.
He has a very simple goal.
He has a very simple goal. He wants revenge, right? And so,
but he's also reluctant, right? He's
not reluctant. He kills everyone.
Well,
so that's my
like
that's my point.
I mean, in the original John Wick, like he was. I mean, by the time we meet him, he's reluctantly brought back into that.
But
world.
Again, he wasn't reluctant when he lost something that was valuable to him. Is my point.
Right.
And so, so I feel like that's something maybe that I actually appreciated about Dune, was even though I think that the actor Timothy Chalamet, I'm not sure. I hope I'm pronouncing. I mean that no disrespect, but I was kind of concerned when he was cast as Paul, because I was kind of like, I just don't think he can embody the character. But I was pleasantly surprised. I don't think he was perfect. I thought he did a good job, though.
He did do a surprisingly good job, because I would agree. When I first saw the trailer, I was like, really? That's Paul.
When I first saw the trailer, I was like, is this a YA novel adaptation?
Right?
I guess I'm an outlier, because I actually kind of always pictured Paul as, he's not a Jason Momoa kind of like physically imposing character or anything else like that. So like it never bothered me that I guess it never struck me as like that was weird. But I mean, I thought he did a pretty good job. He wasn't the best. I don't think he was the best character like acted in the movie, but I thought he was pretty good.
I think they intentionally cast him as somebody who looks young. And I didn't really think of this actually until this conversation. I think they did that very much on purpose to highlight that transition from adolescence to adulthood.
We're running out of time, but
I wonder if he's going to put on like 30. If they make a second movie, they're going to make him put on like 25 pounds or something like that to make him seem or look older.
It wouldn't hurt.
No, it wouldn't.
So we're running out of time, but obviously we all agree we're basically on the same page that it's very good, messy, but we could spend all night doing this. We've already done this for about 90 minutes.
I probably could, actually.
Yeah, probably could.
Can everyone give a shout out their links real quick while we still have a moment? Like, where can people find you guys?
You can find me on my website, studiojakemedia.com. You can read my review of Dune there. It's still up in the top 5 articles.
Just find me at Gingerman Editorial on the Twitter.
I'm BookstoreThor on the Twitter.
Yep, and I'm Tripp, TRIPP _P on the Twitter as well. It was really nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, we've done podcasts.
Sorry, I feel like I've been talking too much, so I'll try to do better in the future.
No, it was good. I mean, I've done podcasts with all of you individually, so everyone should go listen to those and go follow all their links, because they've all got writing online in various places, and there's too many to shout out. So I'm sure you guys can probably send me something to throw on the link dump below. But it was good talking with you all again, and hope you have a good day.
Same here.
Yep. You guys.
See ya.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Cowley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.